Hey there, I'm Taz Singh, and I've been working with communities for as long as I can remember. Fundamentally, communities are made up of people, so this is my journey going to those communities and talking to those people. Come along with me. Amazing. I'm here with my old friend Henri. I've known Henri for about a decade now, from back in Toronto.
Yeah, something like that.
Doing all that, community stuff back in Toronto way back in the day. The things I know about Henri, I just bumped into him last week as well, and he's always wearing these neon hats and neon shoes and everything. You can spot this guy a mile away. It makes it very easy to spot this guy. This guy knows a thing or two about performance. He runs. He does track races. This guy is fast
a bit
in general.
I mean, I don't consider myself that fast, but I definitely try to stay in shape.
You're probably faster than me.
No, we can find out one day.
I don't think it takes much to find out. We can take 10 steps and you'll be faster than me. But yeah, he I know Henri for all this time, and he's been very focused on performance and web performance,
yes.
and kind of teaching performance and kind of evangelizing performance.
Yes.
And today we have him here for you. So
awesome.
I hope you enjoy, Henri.
Glad to be here.
Awesome, dude. But yeah, it was so good seeing you last week. It's been obviously so long, and obviously I've kind of been following your journey over the past decade. This whole time, I think you've gotten into performance. I don't think 10 years ago. It was some point in between there.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know when exactly I kind of discovered it, but I started to watch these conference keynotes online. Specifically, it was a conference called Velocity that was run by O'Reilly, and they used to have these keynotes before they broke out into their sessions and whatnot. And I used to watch people like Steve Souders, who was actually one of the chairs, I believe, at the conference, and they would just talk about performance, and they'd have these performance talks during the keynotes, and I thought that was kind of fascinating, because I was starting to understand what they were talking about in terms resource loadings and the size of resources and things like that. And essentially at the time it was very stopwatchy, how fast is the site loading? It's
yeah.
Do you like some sunglasses?
Oh, I'm okay, thank you.
Good?
Yeah, definitely good.
Thank you.
Thank you very
have some
much.
over there.
Appreciate it.
Just for the record, we were just offered some sunglasses because we're that cool.
Yeah,
we're that
exactly.
cool. We need the sunglasses on.
And we said no because they weren't Ray-Bans. But what I was getting at is back then, the idea of web performance was how fast is a page loading. And one of the things that really got me interested was at the time, I remember, I guess the iPhone came out with the Retina screens. And after I kind of read what they meant by Retina screens and Retina images, and I remember kind of whipping up a quick test at this agency I used to work at, and I understood that, 1 times, 2 times, 3 times, what that was going to mean in terms of the size of resources and, what it meant to load onto a page. And I was I had this aha moment, and I really started to pay attention to performance at the time. So, like I said, between the O'Reilly conferences, specifically Velocity, and at the time, O'Reilly had probably the majority of the performance-related literature out there. So a lot of books came out, and I was buying them all. Digital copies, because I was I loved reading on my iPad. And that started my journey into performance. I started to attend a performance meetup in Toronto. The Toronto Web Performance Group, essentially, that was
which is what you now organize. You now organize the Toronto Web Performance Group.
Absolutely. And you know what? I wouldn't be here without Barbara, who used to be the sort of proprietress and the organizer of the Web Performance Group in Toronto. And I started to attend religiously, and I think she recognized that. And there came a point where she got a little busy, and she wanted to sort of pass it off, and she told me I should be running it.
That's amazing.
She wanted to put this in my hands and under my tutelage.
Taking a step back for a sec, and we'll come back to this because I want to hear more about this. I want to hear more about kind of the Web Performance Group. But stepping back a bit, so what got you into performance was kind of like the online essentially conference talks and learning from others and et cetera. But you've become very impassioned about it, you know.
Yeah, certainly.
You're like what's the story there? Like we know how you learned about it, but what kind of like drew you to that? It was kind of like a magnetic force, and now Henri is just kind of like, you know, being drawn to it. And so everything like your Twitter's performance, your performance, you run track, you know what I mean? You're a fast guy. You're all about performance. Like why is it performance? Like what does performance mean to you?
You know, I thought it was an interesting area of the web simply because no one was talking about it.
Interesting.
And at the time, I remember I was really interested in web performance, and I also had a little penchant for accessibility.
Right.
And I used to tell people, like, I consider both like dark arts, right? And you know, everyone spent time with, you know, the front end, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, you know, et cetera, but somehow they weren't paying attention to accessibility, and they certainly weren't paying attention to performance.
Right.
And you know, in many areas, like in many times, I mean, people didn't even know what either were.
Right.
And but I really wanted to spend a bit more time with performance, so I started to deep dive in that area, spending weekends doing, you know, reading and whatnot. And I just went on this crusade because I realized that this was going to be part of front-end development.
You're right.
You know,
yeah, like oftentimes you're so kind of focused on making sure that things bug-free that accessibility and performance are all afterthoughts at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
And kind of bringing that to the forefront because at the end of the day, they matter, right?
Yes,
performance is accessibility.
Yep.
I mean, if you can't load a page, it's not accessible.
Yep,
you know, by definition.
Yep.
There's so many geographies around the world where
Absolutely.
you know, internet's slow.
Yep.
And it takes a long time to load resources that if the thing doesn't load, it's literally inaccessible.
Yep.
So like it sounds like that was a big drawing force to you, was
Certainly,
kind of evangelizing that, making sure people were aware of like how to make their web applications performant, not only bug free but also fast. And I think oftentimes people think of those two things as like a multi-pass, like make it work, make it good, make it fast. Is that how you think about it, or do you just make things fast at the get-go?
You know, I do believe that you have to sort of at least think about it. And the reason being is that you can sort of, you know, deploy and everything looks good and whatnot, but then you realize afterwards that, you know, your images are too big. You're loading a lot of unnecessary resources, like maybe unnecessary CSS, unnecessary JavaScript. I realized that we're in this sort of JavaScript framework world, and a lot of times it's like, okay, let me just implement this framework, and not realizing that all you wanted was a simple blog. You know, so I get into the idea of performance literacy, which really gets people to think about what they're, during the planning phase, think about what they're trying to do, and then understand what kind of resources they'll need, they'll need, and then make decisions on that kind of framework.
Right.
So, you know, would you need a massive framework to create like a very simple blog?
Right.
Probably not. You know,
and I think like using a massive framework, it might do you essentially more disfavors than favors, because like you got to worry about, you know, server-side rendering, and then like essentially time to first interact, like interactivity.
Yep.
I don't know what the right way to say that.
I mean, that's it. You know, we through like, you know, years and years of research, because I think a lot of people need to realize that no matter how you slice it, you know, there are some discoveries being made on the web each and every day. So we are still kind of like, I tell people the web is still kind of new, you know, and everything that's happening right now is because like technology has allowed it for it to happen, you know. So these are new discoveries that we're making because, you know what, iPhone computing power is, you know, is through the roof now.
Yeah.
Or we're also discovering that, you know, like internet connectivity around the world isn't uniform, right? So these are things that unfortunately sometimes you're discovering after the fact, but if you start to think about it early, you'll make the necessary decisions and choices in your development to make sure that, you know what, I'm going to make sure that someone in Calcutta can access this, you know, even though I am based in New York, even though I'm based in California, but I can make these decisions that will allow for this person to access this content. And I'll give you some quick examples. I remember doing some presentation one day, and during lunch hour, someone came up to me and they said they had an education startup that was based in America, you know, for the community there, X, Y, and Z. And, you know, she basically broke down to me that somehow they started to get students from overseas, and specifically students in India. And they were suddenly just besieged with requests for help, because you know the students couldn't learn, could not load certain resources because they were in very limited connectivity, and they were taken aback by this whole situation. And it was suddenly like, what is going on? We thought we had something smooth happening, and she said she was overwhelmed, and she realized that they had to take care of performance issues. And so these are the kind of challenges that happen in a connected world. You know, like you may have, like I said, a situation in America, in the G8, G7 countries, but you have emerging markets that are picking you up.
I think it's so fascinating because, like, as I said before, like it's make it work, make it good, make it fast. But in this case, the fact that it isn't fast means it doesn't work. Right. And so at the end of the day, they are interconnected concerns. And I think fundamentally, the core theme of everything you're saying, going back to what we were talking about before, is that it's all about people. It's all about making it accessible to people. It's all about making sure it's there for people. Because I mean, for me, like I travel a decent amount, and like oftentimes I have spotty connectivity on my phone even, and I can't load things.
Here, it's been spotty in this park.
Yeah, and we're in California. You know what I mean? We're in Silicon Valley. You know, and internet's kind of been spotty here. And so it's all about people at the end of the day and making it accessible to people. And I think just kind of going back to what you were saying before, it was through people that you learned and kind of got to where you are now. It was through those conference talks that you learned, which were by people. You know,
absolutely.
It was through the Toronto Web Performance Group, which was organized by Barbara, as you were mentioning.
Barbara at the time. You know, she was the one that ran it and just passed it on to me.
And obviously that community around you kind of helped you to kind of understand and kind of hone that craft and hone that art at the end of the day. So yeah, like I'd love to hear more about that.
Oh, I think I have a bit of a passion for the community end. And I think it comes from, and I say this quite often, it comes from the fact that my parents are retired teachers, you know, and it's been very interesting because growing up as a kid, you're like, teaching? Who wants to teach? My parents are teachers. Come on. I mean, I could do better than that. Come on, man. You know, you're a kid. You're like, I don't want to do that. My parents are teachers.
There's no way I want to sleep behind the desk at the school. What are you talking about? Like, that's where all the teachers sleep, is underneath the desk at the school. They just show up in the morning.
Right? But, you know, what I realized in older age is that I started to certainly enjoy the idea of providing some delight in discovery, you know, sort of sharing some information that you didn't know and watching you sort of, you know, watching the gears in your head start to really grind and you know, take it places. And I think the meetup environment provides that. You know, you're going to provide them an opportunity to listen to speakers who they probably wouldn't have previously, and hear content that they probably or maybe wouldn't have come across that early in their career or whatever it is. And then hopefully they go off and read about it some more and become better developers, sharper developers, or more learned developers.
Yeah.
And I think if you start to take that element and try to scale it, it comes down to what I'm doing right now, which is working at a company that, you know, where performance is P1. I mean, this is what we talk about over at Web Page Test, being able to go to conferences, talk about what we're trying to do, part of it, which is like increasing the performance literacy so that you can look at a result page of like, you know, several metrics and understand what each metric means and what it means to your application and where you're having potential failings or where you can improve.
And then ironically, that's all teaching, right?
Yeah,
it's all teaching like
absolutely.
a developer how to better understand kind of the performance environment that they're operating in, which is kind of ironic kind of rolling back, as you're saying, and all the community efforts and everything you're talking about. It's all kind of teaching and education at the end of the day as well. So I think it's an ironic full circle there, but obviously a very rewarding one. Kind of seeing the impact of the work and kind of seeing that next generation of the things that you're kind of working on with that community. I'm not sure about you, but for me, that's always been the most rewarding thing. And so, like, I'm not sure if I ever told you why I started Toronto JS.
I don't think so, actually.
Like as I mentioned several times, Henri and I are from Toronto. We're both from the same city, which is how I know him for so long. But with Toronto JS, like kind of back then, it was like 2010 that I started Toronto JS, and back then. Like so many like C#, Java developers were saying, oh, if you aren't doing C# or Java, you're not a real developer. And I'm just like, oh, come on. Have you seen the applications we're building? Are you seeing how complicated these front-end web applications are going to be? Like it's a very complicated bit of kit. And at the end of the day, everyone, like all the users are going to land on our front end, and then our front is going to talk to your back end. If our front end isn't good, no one's going to hit your back end. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So really, like this is critical, the front end. And the back end is in support of that, and obviously it's still important, and et cetera, but to say that we're not real developers, that is ridiculous. And so started Toronto JavaScript because I wanted to just talk to other developers, just kind of understand what they're doing, how they're doing it, learn from them, you know, just talk about the craft, and hopefully together we can elevate everyone together. And that's how Toronto JS started, was kind of from that whole impetus of saying, no, we are real developers. Let's get developers together and let's talk about a craft. Let's talk about what we're doing, and together we'll elevate everyone. And that's really what Henri is doing as well. He's doing that from a performance perspective. He's getting people together, getting them talking about performance. You've been running events like for quite a while now, getting quite a few people together to just, again, talk about performance and talk about new ways of thinking and quantifying and approaching performance. Essentially, I'm curious, like what's next on the journey of Henri?
You know what? I do believe that there's always going to be a bit of community involvement. You know, and again, I get back to the fact that, my parents, who are retired right now, were teachers, and I think about that sort of environment all the time. So one of the things I like to see and I try to share is that it's funny. In fact, today I was having this conversation with someone on Twitter about some junior developers trying to find their first gig and things like that. And, I'm trying to empower them to kind of like join communities, and in fact, this is something that I talk about sometimes when I do these lunch and learns at boot camps. And I'll usually do like about 45 minutes of like instruction, and then I'll keep the last like 15 minutes to talk about their life after boot camp, and as like new developers. And I try to tell them to, find a particular niche that you're into, no matter how focused it is or how broad, and just join the community. See what people are talking about. Eventually maybe you can pipe in with your input, share some articles that you've been reading, try to understand, the community and how it moves to an extent. But, I think there's absolutely just a priceless element in terms of like being involved with communities, because not only are you going to make discoveries on your own, you're going to learn, you're going to make friends who are going to share content that you're going to learn from again. And then on top of that, I don't think people realize that some of these communities, say like whether it be message boards or Discords or Twitter or whatnot, there are employers out there watching. And they're they see who are the thought leaders and who's sharing information, who's writing blog posts, who's potentially sharing like, I don't know, a talk that they've watched and adding details as to why they liked it.
You're 3,000% correct.
And then next thing you know, and as I like to say, you might get a DM and someone says like, hey, I'd like to talk to you. And that usually means they'd like to know what you're about, and they may have a role for you in some of their at their company, So I think that's really important for developers to understand, especially new ones, because there are opportunities out there beyond just having a resume ready. Having your cover letter or whatever it is that you're trying to do. I think if they realize that if you're seen as someone who's sharing content, sharing interests, sharing technologies, sharing like any kind of material that expresses your sort of enjoyment, your love of particular technologies, companies pay attention to that. You know, and without sort of like lecturing anyone. I try to convey that, and let them know that, there are companies out there that are really interested in seeing people sort of like blossom on their own, and then they might pull you in and say, hey, we have something interesting that you might think might be worth giving a shot.
Yeah. It makes a ton of sense. And I think for me, just listening to what you have to say, like there's two dynamics there which I think are beautiful, which are by elevating people within the community, you elevate the community, which 100%. Elevates the people, which elevates the community, and it's a beautiful positive feedback loop there, where by kind of elevating one, you elevate everyone. By elevating everyone, you elevate the one as well. And so, getting involved in the community, as you're saying, has been massively rewarding for my own career. I attribute all of my success towards the community entirely, and I wouldn't be where I am at all without that.
I think people need to realize, like, a lot of the work you do publicly, it's working for you in the dead of your sleep. Someone's looking at your work while you're, in REM, and again, you wake up to DMs. People will start to co-sign you and say, hey, you need to speak to so-and-so because I know they're working on this right now. And next, they're coming to see you and say, hey, I overheard that, you have this going on, like, tell me some more. Yeah. And I really believe the web and, developers and this industry that we're in is one of the few, if not the only one, where you can go from 0 to like 100 through the community. Yeah. People will co-sign you, people will help you potentially. You can watch talks at community events and collect all this knowledge, and then sort of like, start to do the same and be employed. And as we know, gainfully employed. I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too. But anyway, it's been amazing talking to Henri. Make sure you go follow him. It's been an absolute pleasure, buddy. But the only thing I have to say about Henri is make sure you can keep up with this guy. This guy is fast. All right. Well, nice talking to you, Henri. I'll see y'all later.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.